Your soulmate secretly met her ex last night. This was never supposed to surface.
Listen carefully and stay right here with me, because this message isn't meant to shock you, it's meant to steady you. Something delicate happened last night, something layered and emotionally complex, and the reason you're hearing about it now is not to create fear or jealousy, but to bring awareness before misunderstanding takes over. What surfaced wasn't a plan to betray you, and it wasn't an accident either. It was a moment shaped by unfinished emotion, timing, and truth that hadn't fully found its place yet. Don't look away now, because this isn't the story your mind might immediately try to write. When your soulmate met her ex, it wasn't driven by longing for the past the way people assume. It came from something quieter and heavier, closure that never truly happened, words that were never said with clarity, emotions that were buried instead of resolved. Last night wasn't about rekindling something old, it was about confronting something unresolved that had been quietly influencing her present. Stay with me, because what matters most is why it happened, not just that it happened. Your soulmate has been changing internally over the last few weeks, whether you noticed it or not. Growth has a way of pulling unfinished threads back into view. When someone evolves emotionally, the past doesn't disappear. It asks to be understood properly so it can finally rest. That meeting wasn't a step backward, it was a reckoning with something that needed to be faced honestly. Listen closely here, because secrecy doesn't always mean deception. Sometimes it means confusion, uncertainty, or fear of being misunderstood. She didn't know how to name what she was feeling yet. She didn't want to alarm you or open a conversation she herself couldn't fully explain. Silence, in that moment, felt safer than premature honesty. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it human. Don't skip this part, because your own emotions are part of this unfolding too. If you felt uneasy, distracted, or unusually alert since last night, or even before, it's not coincidence. Soul connections are sensitive. They respond to emotional shifts before logic catches up. Your body picked up on something shifting in the emotional field between you long before the details reached your awareness. Stay right here, because assumptions will try to rush in next. The mind loves to fill gaps with worst-case scenarios. But what happened wasn't romantic, and it wasn't physical. It was emotional territory being revisited to understand why it still held weight. People don't always realize that unresolved endings can quietly influence present choices. She needed to see it clearly to understand what it wasn't anymore. Listen carefully now, because this meeting changed something for her, but not in the way you fear. It clarified rather than confused. It showed her how much she has grown. It revealed the distance between who she was then and who she is now. That realization doesn't pull her backward, it grounds her in the present. Sometimes seeing the past clearly is what finally loosens its grip. Don't look away here, because this is where trust becomes nuanced. Trust doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means allowing space for honesty to emerge without punishment. She is processing how to talk about this, not whether to hide it forever. The fact that it surfaced energetically means it's already moving toward truth. Secrets that are meant to remain hidden don't ripple outward like this. Stay with me, because timing matters. If this had surfaced before clarity formed, it would have caused chaos. Now, it arrives with the potential for understanding instead. She's realizing that transparency matters more than comfort. That realization is new, and it's still settling. Growth doesn't announce itself loudly, it arrives as discomfort that demands integrity. Listen closely here, because your response, internal and external, will shape what happens next more than the event itself. Reactivity would turn a moment of closure into a fracture. Presence turns it into a conversation. You don't need to confront, you need to listen. Listening doesn't mean agreeing, it means allowing the truth to land without distortion. Don't skip this insight, because fear will try to convince you that you were replaced or sidelined. That's not what happened. If anything, the meeting highlighted what didn't belong to her anymore. The past showed its limitations clearly. That kind of clarity can be uncomfortable, but it's also liberating. It often strengthens present connections rather than weakening them. Stay right here, because this is where boundaries and compassion meet. You're allowed to feel unsettled. You're allowed to want honesty. And you're allowed to take time before responding. Strength isn't about immediate reactions, it's about measured ones. Measured responses protect dignity on both sides. Listen carefully now, because this wasn't supposed to surface yet, and that's okay. Not everything surfaces on schedule. Sometimes truth comes out because it needs to, not because it's convenient. The universe doesn't expose to punish, it exposes to realign. What's being realigned now is honesty, not loyalty. Don't look away, because this moment invites a deeper conversation about emotional transparency going forward. Not interrogation. Not defense. Conversation. A shared understanding of what closure looks like, what boundaries mean, and how the past is handled when it resurfaces unexpectedly. Those conversations don't weaken bonds, they mature them. Stay with me a little longer, because your soulmate is also feeling the weight of this moment. She knows that silence can erode trust even when intentions weren't harmful. She's learning that honesty delayed can still feel like dishonesty received. That awareness is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Necessary for growth. Necessary for respect. Listen closely here, because the truth isn't finished revealing itself yet. This is only the first layer. There's more context, more clarity, and more understanding coming, but it won't arrive through pressure. It arrives through calm, grounded presence. When safety is felt, honesty follows naturally. Don't skip this final thought, because it matters more than the headline. This situation doesn't define your connection. How it's handled does. Moments like this either fracture trust or refine it. And refinement, while uncomfortable, often leads to something more real than before. Stay right here. Breathe. Let the intensity settle. What happened last night wasn't meant to pull you apart, it was meant to surface something that needed to be addressed so it could stop influencing the present from the shadows. If this message helped you feel steadier instead of more anxious, stay connected. Subscribe and remain here, because the next part will help you understand what this meeting truly changed, and how to move forward without losing yourself or the truth. Don't turn away now, stay with me, because what comes after something surfaces is always more important than what surfaced in the first place. Once the meeting happened and the moment passed, your soulmate didn't walk away relieved or satisfied. She walked away thoughtful, quiet, and emotionally heavier than she expected. Not because she wanted something back, but because she finally saw something clearly. Clarity doesn't always feel good at first. Sometimes it feels like grief for a version of yourself you've already outgrown. Listen carefully here, because the truth is settling in layers. After last night, she didn't replay the conversation the way people replay romantic moments. She replayed it like someone reviewing a chapter they're finally ready to close. She noticed what wasn't there anymore. The emotional pull she once confused for love felt distant. The familiarity felt hollow. And that realization landed harder than nostalgia ever could. Sometimes closure doesn't come from saying goodbye, it comes from realizing there's nothing left to say. Stay right here, because guilt is part of this story, but not the way you might assume. She's not feeling guilty for meeting him. She's feeling guilty for not knowing how to tell you yet. Not because she wants to hide forever, but because she's afraid of how it will sound without the full context she's still forming herself. Fear of being misunderstood can silence even honest people. That fear doesn't mean dishonesty, it means vulnerability without a script. Don't skip this moment, because your energy matters more now than you realize. If you've been feeling restless, distracted, or emotionally alert, it's because the connection between you registered the shift. Emotional events don't exist in isolation when souls are bonded. The ripple reached you before the explanation did. That doesn't mean danger, it means sensitivity. Sensitivity is what allows deeper connection, but it also requires grounding. Listen closely now, because after the meeting, your soulmate started asking herself uncomfortable questions. Not about her ex, but about herself. Why did she feel the need to go? What part of her was still carrying unfinished emotion? What does honesty really look like when timing is imperfect? These questions aren't threats to your bond. They're evidence of growth. People who don't care don't self-reflect like this. Stay with me, because reflection brings responsibility. She's realizing that intention doesn't erase impact. That even actions meant for closure can feel unsettling when discovered without context. This awareness is changing how she thinks about transparency going forward. She's understanding that protecting peace through silence can sometimes damage trust more than truth ever would. Don't look away here, because this isn't about excuses, it's about ownership. She knows now that avoiding a hard conversation doesn't make it disappear. It just delays it. And delay carries its own cost. That realization didn't come from you pushing or questioning. It came from the quiet after the meeting, when everything finally slowed down enough for honesty to speak. Listen carefully, because the past didn't win last night, it lost its power. Seeing her ex in real time stripped away the fantasy that memory can create. What once felt unresolved now feels complete. Closure isn't always gentle. Sometimes it arrives as disappointment, not relief. But disappointment is honest. It doesn't seduce you back into old patterns. Stay right here, because your role now isn't to interrogate or withdraw. It's to remain steady. Steadiness creates safety. Safety invites truth. When someone feels emotionally safe, they don't need to hide, they need to explain. Explanation comes when fear of reaction softens. Your calm is more influential than confrontation ever could be. Don't skip this insight, because trust is being redefined in real time. Trust isn't about pretending this didn't happen. It's about allowing space for accountability without punishment. Accountability means she recognizes the impact. Punishment would push her into defensiveness. The difference between the two will determine whether this moment becomes a fracture or a foundation. Listen closely now, because she's also learning something about boundaries. Not just with the past, but with herself. She's seeing that some doors don't need to be reopened, even for closure. That understanding didn't fully exist before last night. It exists now. Growth often requires contrast to become visible. Stay with me, because there's a quiet grief she's processing too. Grief for the time she spent holding onto something that no longer fits. Grief for the version of herself that didn't know how to end things cleanly. That grief isn't about loss of love, it's about loss of illusion. Illusions are comforting until they dissolve. When they do, reality steps in. Don't look away, because this is where honesty is preparing to surface. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But thoughtfully. She's considering how to speak without minimizing what happened or exaggerating it. She wants to be truthful without being careless. That balance takes time. It doesn't mean avoidance, it means care. Listen carefully here, because your own boundaries are allowed to exist too. You're allowed to want clarity. You're allowed to ask questions. And you're allowed to take time before deciding how you feel. Strength isn't about immediate forgiveness or immediate distance. It's about responding from self-respect rather than shock. Stay right here, because emotional maturity is being tested on both sides. For her, it's about accountability without defensiveness. For you, it's about discernment without assumption. Neither of you needs to be perfect here. You just need to be honest and grounded. Don't skip this moment, because the story your mind might want to tell is harsher than reality. This wasn't betrayal dressed as closure. It was closure discovered through an imperfect process. That distinction matters. It doesn't erase the discomfort, but it changes its meaning. Listen closely now, because moving forward doesn't require pretending nothing happened. It requires integrating what happened honestly. Integration allows growth. Suppression creates cracks. This moment is offering you both the chance to strengthen the structure instead of decorating over damage. Stay with me, because what happens next depends less on last night and more on the next conversation. Conversations guided by calm reveal truth. Conversations driven by fear create distance. You get to choose which energy you bring into that space. Don't look away here, because your intuition will guide you better than suspicion ever could. Pay attention to how your body feels when you imagine talking about this. Tightness signals fear. Groundedness signals readiness. Let readiness guide timing. Listen carefully, because this situation is not finished revealing itself yet. There is more understanding coming, not through surveillance or assumption, but through honesty that feels safe to express. Safety doesn't mean comfort. It means respect. Stay right here, because respect is the bridge between mistake and repair. Without respect, conversations collapse into defense. With respect, even difficult truths can be held without destroying connection. Don't skip this final thought, because it reframes everything. This moment wasn't meant to pull the past back into your present, it was meant to remove the past's quiet influence altogether. What surfaced did so to be addressed, not to be repeated. Stay with me. Breathe. Let the intensity settle before you decide what it means. Clarity is forming, and when it arrives fully, it will feel steadier than fear. If this message helped you stay grounded instead of spiraling, stay connected. Subscribe and remain here, because what comes next is not about what happened, but about how honesty reshapes what's possible. Don't look away right now, stay here with me, because this phase is where the meaning of everything begins to take shape in a way that isn't obvious at first. After the initial shock softens and the emotional noise quiets down, what remains is something more delicate: awareness. Your soulmate is no longer replaying the meeting itself as much as she's noticing how it changed the way she feels about honesty, trust, and herself. That shift isn't loud, but it's permanent. Listen carefully, because what she's sitting with now isn't desire or nostalgia. It's accountability. Accountability feels heavy at first because it requires looking at yourself without excuses. She's realizing that even when intentions aren't harmful, actions still carry weight. That realization is uncomfortable, but it's also the doorway into maturity. People who aren't growing don't feel this discomfort, they deflect it. Stay right here, because you may feel something changing in your own emotional state as well. The initial confusion is giving way to something steadier. Not clarity yet, but grounding. You're less reactive than you might have expected. That's not denial. That's your nervous system stabilizing enough to actually process what happened instead of being overwhelmed by it. Don't skip this moment, because after the meeting, your soulmate started seeing her past relationship differently. Not through anger, not through longing, but through realism. She's recognizing how much of that connection was built on habit rather than alignment. Habit can feel powerful because it's familiar, but familiarity isn't the same as truth. Seeing that difference clearly is sobering. Listen closely now, because sobering moments don't pull people backward, they wake them up. She's understanding that the ex no longer holds emotional authority over her present. The meeting didn't reopen a door. It closed one properly. Closure that comes late can still be valid. What matters is that it comes honestly. Stay with me, because there's also a quiet fear she's carrying right now. Not fear of losing the past, but fear of losing your trust. That fear isn't manipulative, it's human. Trust matters to her more now than it did before, because she understands its fragility better. You don't fear losing what you don't value. Don't look away here, because value is being reassessed on both sides. You're noticing what matters to you in moments like this. What feels acceptable? What feels unsettling? What you need in order to feel safe going forward. These realizations aren't reactions, they're clarifications. Clarifications shape boundaries, and boundaries protect self-respect. Listen carefully, because this is where the story could go in two very different directions depending on how it's handled. Avoidance would freeze growth. Honesty allows it to continue. Your soulmate is leaning toward honesty, even though it feels risky. Risk doesn't always mean danger. Sometimes it means integrity is finally being prioritized over comfort. Stay right here, because integrity doesn't announce itself with big gestures. It shows up as willingness to face consequences without defensiveness. She's preparing herself emotionally for a conversation that doesn't center her intentions, but acknowledges the impact. That's a hard shift to make, and it doesn't happen instantly. Don't skip this insight, because the timing of honesty matters. Rushed truth can feel careless. Delayed truth can feel deceptive. She's trying to find a moment where honesty can land without exploding. That doesn't mean she's calculating, it means she's aware that words can either heal or harm depending on how they're delivered. Listen closely now, because your calm is shaping the environment whether you speak or not. Calm doesn't mean silence forever. It means not letting fear lead the conversation. Fear wants certainty immediately. Calm allows clarity to emerge naturally. When someone feels they won't be attacked, they're more likely to be truthful. Stay with me, because the emotional field between you is adjusting. What once felt ambiguous now feels like it's moving toward definition. Definition doesn't always mean reassurance. Sometimes it means truth that requires adjustment. Adjustment isn't failure. It's alignment correcting itself. Don't look away here, because this moment is also teaching you something about yourself. You're learning that you can hold discomfort without collapsing. You don't need to rush to conclusions or retreat into numbness. That ability is strength. Emotional strength isn't loud, it's steady. Listen carefully, because steadiness allows discernment. Discernment helps you separate what happened from what it means. The event itself was one thing. The meaning you assign to it will determine whether it becomes a wound or a lesson. Lessons inform the future. Wounds anchor you to the past. Stay right here, because your soulmate is also letting go of an illusion she didn't know she was still carrying, the illusion that closure could be achieved without transparency. She's seeing now that truth eventually demands to be shared. Keeping it contained only gives it more power internally. Don't skip this part, because power dynamics are shifting. Not in a dramatic way, but in a healthy one. She's stepping out of emotional secrecy. You're stepping into emotional clarity. These shifts don't happen overnight, but they're already in motion. Listen closely now, because you may feel moments of sadness surface unexpectedly. Not sadness about betrayal, but sadness about imperfection. Relationships aren't always clean. People don't always handle transitions gracefully. Grieving that reality doesn't mean giving up, it means accepting complexity. Stay with me, because acceptance reduces bitterness. Bitterness keeps you stuck in judgment. Acceptance allows you to move forward with wisdom instead of resentment. You don't have to excuse what happened to understand it. Don't look away here, because understanding is forming on both sides. She's understanding her responsibility. You're understanding your needs. When both happen at the same time, growth becomes possible. Listen carefully, because conversations that come from this place are different. They're less about proving innocence and more about establishing trust going forward. Trust isn't rebuilt through explanations alone, it's rebuilt through consistency after truth is spoken. Stay right here, because consistency takes time to observe. One conversation doesn't resolve everything. Patterns do. Pay attention to how honesty shows up after the truth is shared, not just how the truth is delivered. Don't skip this insight, because patience doesn't mean tolerating behavior that hurts you. It means giving yourself time to see whether actions align with words. Alignment is what restores confidence. Listen closely now, because your intuition will become clearer as emotions settle. Intuition speaks softly. It doesn't scream panic. It offers quiet guidance. The calmer you are, the easier it is to hear. Stay with me, because this isn't the end of the story. It's the middle. The part where tension resolves into understanding or reveals what needs to change. Either way, clarity is coming. Don't look away at this final moment, because you're being invited to respond from self-respect rather than fear. Self-respect doesn't close your heart. It protects it while staying open to truth. Stay here. Breathe. Let the dust settle before deciding what this means for you. What surfaced wasn't meant to destabilize you. It was meant to remove something hidden so it could stop influencing the present. If this helped you feel more grounded and less overwhelmed, stay connected. Subscribe and remain here, because the next part will focus on how truth, once spoken, reshapes what's possible without destroying what still matters. Don't rush past this, stay right here, because this is the stage where the truth stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like information. After the emotional dust settles, after the mind stops replaying details on a loop, something steadier takes its place. Your soulmate is no longer focused on what happened as an event, she's focused on what it revealed about herself. That shift matters. When people move from defense to reflection, growth becomes possible. Listen carefully now, because reflection is quieter than regret. Regret fixates on what can't be changed. Reflection asks what can be learned. She's noticing how easily good intentions can coexist with poor judgment, and how important it is to own that gap without minimizing it. This isn't about self-punishment. It's about responsibility. Responsibility is what allows trust to rebuild in real ways rather than symbolic ones. Stay with me for a moment, because you might feel a different kind of calm settling in. Not relief, not closure, but steadiness. The nervous system begins to realize it survived the uncertainty. You're not bracing as much. You're observing. That observation gives you leverage. When you're not flooded with emotion, you can actually discern what matters to you moving forward. Don't look away here, because this is where honesty begins to feel less dangerous to her. The fear of being misunderstood hasn't disappeared, but it's no longer in control. She's recognizing that avoiding truth doesn't preserve peace, it postpones discomfort. And postponed discomfort tends to grow teeth. This realization doesn't push her to confess impulsively, it grounds her in the need to speak with care. Listen closely, because care is becoming a central theme. Care for your feelings. Care for the connection. Care for her own integrity. Care changes the tone of everything. It slows conversations down. It adds pauses. It removes the urge to justify and replaces it with the willingness to listen. That shift doesn't come from guilt, it comes from maturity. Stay right here, because your own sense of self is recalibrating too. You're noticing what you can tolerate and what you can't. You're becoming clearer about what honesty looks like to you, not just in words, but in timing and behavior. This clarity isn't hardening you. It's grounding you. Grounded people don't need to control outcomes to feel safe. Don't skip this moment, because this is where boundaries begin to feel natural rather than defensive. Boundaries aren't reactions to fear. They're expressions of self-respect. You may feel less inclined to interrogate and more inclined to state what you need. That shift invites healthier dialogue. Interrogation creates resistance. Needs create understanding. Listen carefully now, because understanding doesn't mean agreement. It means seeing the full picture without distortion. You can understand why something happened and still decide it doesn't work for you. Both can coexist. This duality is part of emotional adulthood. It prevents you from swinging between extremes. Stay with me, because your soulmate is also sitting with a new awareness about transparency. She's learning that transparency isn't about telling everything immediately, it's about not withholding once clarity forms. That distinction matters. Oversharing before understanding can confuse. Withholding after understanding can erode trust. She's finding the line between the two. Don't look away here, because this is where patience becomes strategic rather than passive. Patience allows patterns to emerge. Patterns reveal truth more reliably than explanations ever could. You're not being asked to ignore your instincts, you're being asked to observe whether actions align with words over time. Listen closely, because alignment is the real measure now. Not how convincingly something is explained, but how consistently it's lived. Consistency doesn't require perfection. It requires effort repeated over time. You're becoming attuned to that difference, and it's sharpening your discernment. Stay right here, because this phase also brings up grief in subtle ways. Grief for the fantasy of simplicity. Grief for the idea that love would always be straightforward. Acknowledging that grief doesn't weaken your bond with reality, it strengthens it. When illusions fall away, what remains is real. Don't skip this insight, because real connections survive complexity. Fragile ones require perfection. You're learning which kind you're dealing with by how complexity is handled now. Complexity handled with care builds resilience. Complexity handled with avoidance builds distance. Listen carefully now, because conversations that come from this place will sound different. There will be fewer defenses, fewer absolutes, more listening. You may notice moments where silence is allowed to exist without being filled. Silence like that isn't emptiness. It's respect for what's being processed. Stay with me, because respect also means allowing yourself to feel whatever comes up without judging it. Anger, sadness, confusion, curiosity, none of these invalidate you. They're signals. Signals don't need to be suppressed, they need to be interpreted calmly. Don't look away here, because calm interpretation prevents escalation. Escalation turns moments into battles. Calm turns moments into conversations. Conversations, when done well, don't guarantee outcomes, but they do guarantee clarity. Listen closely, because clarity doesn't always arrive as reassurance. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet knowing that something needs to change. Change isn't always separation. Sometimes it's renegotiation. Sometimes it's recalibration. The form change takes will reveal itself when fear stops rushing the process. Stay right here, because your soulmate is also renegotiating with herself. She's asking what kind of partner she wants to be, not just what kind of partner she wants to have. That internal standard will influence everything that follows. Standards held internally are more reliable than promises made externally. Don't skip this moment, because standards create structure. Structure supports trust. Trust supports vulnerability. Vulnerability, when supported, deepens connection. Each layer depends on the one beneath it. Right now, the foundation is being reinforced. Listen carefully now, because you may feel tempted to jump ahead and imagine conclusions. Gently bring yourself back to the present. The present holds more information than imagined futures ever will. Presence keeps you from borrowing trouble. Stay with me, because the way you show up now, grounded, attentive, self-respecting, sets the tone for what's possible next. You don't need to threaten or withdraw to protect yourself. Your steadiness is protection. Don't look away, because steadiness communicates confidence without words. Confidence invites honesty. Honesty invites repair. Repair, when sincere, often strengthens bonds beyond their previous state. Listen closely, because repair doesn't erase the past. It integrates it. Integration means the past no longer controls the present from the shadows. It becomes part of the story, not the author of it. Stay right here, because this moment is about choosing how the story continues. Not through force, not through fear, but through clarity and self-respect. You're allowed to take your time deciding what this means for you. Don't skip this final thought, because it reframes everything. What surfaced wasn't meant to destabilize your sense of self. It was meant to bring hidden dynamics into the light so they could be addressed honestly. Light doesn't destroy what's real, it reveals it. Stay with me. Breathe. Let the process unfold without rushing to verdicts. Truth handled with care has a way of creating outcomes that feel cleaner than fear ever could. If this helped you feel steadier and more centered, stay connected. Subscribe and remain here, because the next layer focuses on how trust is rebuilt, or clarified, through consistent action after the truth is fully spoken. Don't scroll away, stay right here with me, because this is the phase where everything quietly proves what it really is. After the truth has surfaced, after the emotions have moved through their sharpest edges, life resumes in small, ordinary moments. And it's inside those ordinary moments that the real test begins. Your soulmate is no longer dealing with the shock of what happened, she's dealing with the responsibility of what comes next. Responsibility doesn't announce itself loudly. It shows up in consistency, or the lack of it. Listen carefully now, because this is where words stop being the focus and behavior takes over. Apologies, explanations, and intentions matter, but they are only the doorway. What actually rebuilds or clarifies trust is what happens when no one is actively talking about the situation anymore. Your soulmate is becoming aware of this too. She knows that what she does in the days and weeks that follow carries more weight than anything she could say in one conversation. Stay with me, because you may notice yourself watching more than reacting. You're paying attention to tone, effort, follow-through, and presence. That doesn't make you suspicious, it makes you discerning. Discernment is what develops after trust is shaken and the nervous system learns to slow down instead of panic. You're no longer rushing to decide what this means. You're allowing reality to show you. Don't look away here, because this is where sincerity either deepens or collapses. Sincerity isn't proven through emotional intensity, it's proven through steadiness. Does she show up when it's inconvenient? Does she remain open when conversations are uncomfortable? Does she take responsibility without needing reassurance in return? These details answer questions more honestly than promises ever could. Listen closely now, because your soulmate is also navigating discomfort in a new way. She's realizing that repair requires patience. That trust isn't restored by urgency, but by reliability. This realization can feel frustrating because it removes shortcuts. There's no way to rush credibility. It's built slowly, through repetition, through alignment between words and actions. Stay right here, because you may feel moments of internal conflict arise. Part of you may want to move forward quickly and leave this behind. Another part may want to slow everything down until certainty returns. Neither part is wrong. This tension is a sign that you care about protecting yourself and honoring connection at the same time. Balancing those two takes awareness, not force. Don't skip this moment, because awareness is what keeps you from abandoning yourself. You're learning that you don't need to ignore red flags to be compassionate, and you don't need to shut down to feel safe. You can hold space for accountability while also holding boundaries. That ability is emotional strength. Listen carefully, because boundaries are becoming clearer now. Not as ultimatums, but as internal standards. You're noticing what you're willing to work through and what you're not. You're understanding that forgiveness doesn't mean erasing impact. It means deciding, consciously, how much access someone has to your inner world while trust is rebuilding. Stay with me, because this phase is uncomfortable precisely because it's honest. There's no dramatic storyline to hide behind anymore. Just real people, real choices, and real consequences. Your soulmate is sitting with that reality too. She's learning that being trusted again isn't about convincing, it's about demonstrating. Don't look away here, because demonstration takes time. It shows up in consistency across moods, across stress, across silence. Anyone can be present when things feel calm. Growth shows itself when things feel awkward, uncertain, or emotionally exposed. Pay attention to how those moments are handled. Listen closely now, because your own nervous system is recalibrating. You may notice that you're less emotionally flooded than before. Less likely to spiral. More able to pause and reflect. This isn't emotional detachment, it's regulation. Regulation allows you to respond instead of react. That changes the entire dynamic. Stay right here, because response creates clarity. Reaction creates chaos. The calmer you are, the more information becomes visible. You start to see patterns instead of isolated incidents. Patterns don't lie. They reveal whether change is temporary or genuine. Don't skip this insight, because genuine change doesn't require constant reassurance. It stands on its own. If someone is truly integrating a lesson, you won't have to remind them repeatedly. They'll adjust naturally. If reminders are constantly needed, the change is still intellectual, not embodied. Listen carefully now, because your soulmate is learning that embodiment matters. She's realizing that remorse without change is hollow. That awareness is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Necessary for growth. Necessary for repair to be real rather than symbolic. Stay with me, because you may feel moments of grief surface again. Not grief for the relationship, but grief for the version of certainty you thought you had. Let that grief exist. It doesn't mean the connection is doomed. It means your understanding of it is maturing. Don't look away here, because maturity often feels quieter than hope. Hope is loud and anticipatory. Maturity is steady and observant. You're moving from hope-driven connection to reality-based connection. Reality-based connection is less dramatic, but more sustainable. Listen closely now, because sustainability matters more than intensity. Intensity burns bright but fast. Sustainability builds slowly and lasts. If this connection continues, it will do so from a different foundation than before. That foundation is being tested now. Stay right here, because testing doesn't mean destruction. Testing reveals strength. If something is real, it withstands pressure. If it's fragile, pressure exposes cracks. Exposure isn't failure, it's information. Don't skip this part, because information empowers you. You're no longer guessing. You're observing. And observation gives you choice. Choice restores agency. Agency keeps you from feeling trapped by someone else's actions. Listen carefully, because your soulmate is also experiencing a shift in how she views accountability. Accountability is no longer something to fear, it's something to practice. Practicing accountability changes how someone shows up long-term. It replaces defensiveness with openness. Stay with me, because openness doesn't guarantee comfort. It guarantees truth. Truth may ask for renegotiation, slower pacing, or clearer agreements. Those aren't signs of weakness. They're signs of respect. Don't look away here, because respect is the currency now. Respect for your boundaries. Respect for her growth process. Respect for the reality that trust rebuilds in stages, not all at once. Listen closely now, because this stage isn't about deciding everything immediately. It's about gathering enough lived evidence to know what feels right. Rushing to closure can rob you of that clarity. Let time do some of the work. Stay right here, because time reveals intention. Not through waiting passively, but through watching actively. Active observation means staying engaged with your own needs while noticing how the connection unfolds. Don't skip this insight, because your needs matter just as much as her intentions. If something doesn't feel right, that feeling is data. You don't have to accuse or suppress it. You can acknowledge it and see how it evolves. Listen carefully, because evolution is happening on both sides. She's learning how to live with integrity after a misstep. You're learning how to protect your heart without closing it. Both lessons are valuable, regardless of outcome. Stay with me, because this isn't about winning or losing the relationship. It's about aligning with what honors you. Alignment brings peace, even when choices are hard. Don't look away now, because peace doesn't always come from staying or leaving. It comes from clarity. Clarity comes from honesty, consistency, and self-respect working together. Stay right here. Breathe. Let the days ahead show you what words alone cannot. What matters will reveal itself through action, not pressure. If this helped you feel steadier and more grounded, stay connected. Subscribe and remain here, because the next layer focuses on what becomes possible once patterns are clear, and how to choose from a place of strength rather than fear.